And we're live, Stephen, so go ahead.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to spend the next hour talking to you about AI and with a cybersecurity context around that. But before we get started, maybe we'll just do some quick introductions. So I'm Stephen Mathezer. I'm a senior director at iON United. We're based out of Calgary, Canada, and we are a pure play cybersecurity organization. We sell lots of products, but we do a lot of consulting services around cybersecurity going on 21 years or so. I've had a whole bunch of security roles, and I lead our consulting practice these days. Jamie and Danny, over to you.
Cool. Go on then, Danny. I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm Danny. I'm Chief Growth Officer at Razer. So we're a software consultancy specialising in AI, machine learning, and data. My main background is actually engineering and design, and now I get to spend my time talking about AI and, in this particular example, security.
Amazing. Great to see you all today, everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm the CEO of Razer. As Danny mentioned, we're data, AI, machine learning experts. We've built loads and loads of software over the years, some of it with AI at its core, some of it without. But all of this software that we have to build always has a security bent. So we've spent a lot of time working with people like Stephen, who comes along and tries to break into our software and see where we've made some mistakes. So we have a fond affinity with companies like iON. And also, we're part of the same group. So iON and Razer are part of Fulcrum IT Partners. So we're very much so good friends. If you hadn't noticed, we also have English accents. We are based in the UK. Yeah, we love the US and the Canadians, and we love working together with everyone in this technology space.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And we're going to keep this pretty informal. We're basically going to have a conversation amongst ourselves, but we would love for everyone to chime in the Q&A. If it makes sense, we will try and answer those questions live, and we will leave some time to circle back to those questions at the end. So please feel free. You should see a Q&A button. Please drop some questions in there, and we will pick those up as we go.
Amazing. We'll try and answer them as well. Be kind to us.
All right. So I guess to kick things off here, I know most of our customers and probably a lot of the people in attendance today are thinking about AI from a corporate security perspective. So I know I have some ideas on risks when it comes to AI in an enterprise or corporate context. But what are you guys seeing there?
What are we seeing? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of apprehension around actually how do you use AI in a secure way. So that's everything from data leakage in terms of IP. It's, say, if we look at, say, Copilot, is that now a new risk factor, a new attack vector? And we're seeing that those tools are coming out. How's it used to prevent people from being abused? And also, we're seeing lots and lots in the space of actually how can we use AI to, I suppose, mitigate the attack vectors. So what we're seeing is, well, I'm sure you're seeing this, Stephen, if you think, if I can create content really, really quickly, how can that be used against me? How can I protect myself from being abused and copied? So this is coming into IP realms. It's coming into my legitimacy. How am I going to even be a thing in the future if it's so easy to copy me? So we're seeing lots and lots of different attack vectors from that space. But the people are really, really keen to use it, but not really sure where the guardrails are or what can be used, what can't be used, and how they should use it properly.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times the general control over the sort of the employees using these tools. So they're saying a lot of our employees using ChatGPT, we're kind of seeing benefits from using it, but then also we're really worried about where that data's going. Is it?
Well, was it Samsung who they actually banned the whole use of ChatGPT because they put all their code in there and then went, hang on, oh dear, what have we done? Because everything you put in there just goes out into the ether. That's it. It's gone. Once it's been published, it's gone. But before, like ChatGPT, you'd never open up your GitHub profile as a company like Samsung for anyone to go and use and see. So we're seeing all sorts of like almost like script kiddies using it to accelerate their adoption of I don't know, DDoS or manipulate it. There was a company in the UK called TalkTalk, and they had a very serious breach, a data breach. Everything went, and it turned out it was a 15-year-old kid in his bedroom using I don't know if it's like Burp or some sort of tool. You'll know better than us, Stephen, what sort of tool they were using, and they were able to just extract all of the data. Now, if you could do that back then, what could you do now? Could you just ask ChatGPT to accelerate your usage of these tools, copy what people are saying, replicate people, use the tools to break in? It's becoming so fast and so prevalent. Are the tools to mitigate it actually catching up?
So that's actually something I've thought about a lot. So I think of this two different ways. Something like Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah.
It is very much indexing files, think SharePoint, OneDrive, and we all know how well permissions get managed on OneDrive and SharePoint, which is to say not at all. So it's very, it's very common to see the go-to example, right? Give me, financial statements, give me HR data, give me salaries, and Copilot's indexed it because somebody shared it somewhere, even though you don't have a link to that, it's been shared and Copilot accesses it, and it'll show you that kind of data. That kind of thing's pretty obvious to me as a risk. But if we're talking about the open AIs of the world, yes, what your questions are feeding the model. But how, in the context of something like OpenAI, how likely is it, it's feeding a model. How is my data still there? How easy is it for someone without really knowing, who's said what to the AI or what kinds of files or data they have access to? Is it really that easy to pull that information back out again?
Yeah, it's not quite so easy, because obviously the large language models are basically just word prompts. It's what's the best next guess of a word. So if you are really specific with your prompting, you probably, when we just ask it you can just ask it a question, and it's very good at coming back with something so confidently it's right. Maybe it gets hallucinations or anything else like that. But if you were really smart with your prompting, now I don't know if everyone starts to use, say, like if you're prompting, there's lots of cards on like LinkedIn saying this is how you should prompt to get the best results. You know that the more specific your prompts, the better results you get. So if you say, for example, rather than say write me a story, act as a professional copywriter. You've got to tell it to be a professional copywriter, and then you say sound like certain people in terms of their words, and then it'll write something, and then you can keep prompting it. You're basically giving it more and more information. I think if you were that smart with your prompting, potentially you could narrow it all the way down, because it's essentially one massive decision tree, boosted decision tree model. How it goes, what's my next word that's the best guess after the one I've just written based on what I've been asked. If you were that specific, it could potentially eke out some unique specific data. I think we're sort of seeing that with you mentioned about Copilot. Now you've probably seen with the recent LOL Copilot, you can actually, there's a tool like Burp for specifically for Copilot where you can inject prompts. So if you know the context, or you can send the prompt in so people can't even see it on an email. They don't even have to open it, but that prompt can run in their context. So straight away, you've not got a massive large language model. You're basically against their RAG model in their context. You can go and change and mutate stuff and get specific things out. So you can use it in really creative ways. Where that's going, I don't know what's next, and I think it's going to be an interesting one.
But that is becoming more popular, isn't it? People wanting smaller models which do certain things really well, instead of having this large general purpose model which is kind of trained from here, there, and everywhere, and the data isn't necessarily segregated in the right way, and you're pulling from this big pond instead of just pulling from a smaller place.
Fine-tuned.
Yeah.
It's a great question there, actually.
Yeah, and so you could. I'm assuming that one of the advantages of a smaller model is you're less likely to get those hallucinations as long as you're staying on topic and asking relevant questions. You're much more likely to get relevant answers. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, well, they're only then trained on the thing it's been set out to do. So it is AI, but it's not flowing outside of what it's trained for. So if you only give it data on, say, revenue projections, for instance, or just financial data, it can only answer them questions based on what it's been given.
Yeah, rather than the whole internet of everything that's ever been produced ever in the world. To do those next word predictions, you've actually narrowed it down. So like the Llama model, that's a foundational model, or GPT-4 or 4.0, or they're huge billions and billions of points in terms of models. But if you have these small ones that are honed in a certain industry or a certain sector or certain specific nature, then actually they're a hell of a lot less of an overhead to run. Obviously, there's a huge cost, but also you're less likely to get deviations or randomness. So we're seeing quite a bit of that recently.
So there's a question here relevant to what we're talking about, which is how can we prevent patents or patent ownership from being shared with AI? And so my question to you guys is, so first of all, for anyone who has kids, can you adequately control what your kids do on the internet today? Yeah, you don't need to answer. The answer is pretty much no, unless you're in the room 24/7 watching what they're doing. To some extent, I think the same is true with corporate data. You can have policies, you can have technical controls, you can do a lot of things, but it gets very, very difficult to cover all the bases. I mean, yeah, we talk about OpenAI or ChatGPT, but there's hundreds and hundreds of AIs out there today, and we can't police them all. So how can you prevent corporate information from getting shared? Like, are we talking about providing AI gateways, putting AIs in front of AIs to filter what you're sending to them? How do you deal with that?
It's really hard. To that point around like the patent ownership, obviously a patent, as soon as it's patented, it's in the public domain. So there's nothing to stop me as a human being going and look at it. So a large language model, it will suck that up in the next generation of that model when it's being retrained. However, when you go to private IP and private documents of an organization, what you can do is you set up, you can even run this on-prem as well. You don't have to run it in the cloud, so you're not trusting someone else's compute. You build up something called RAG models, and you use that data to create your own subset internally. So that's where all the prompt engineering agents come into play. So you basically train your own internal system. It's a bit like Microsoft's Copilots using those internal data sources, but you can segregate it. As I say, you can run it on-prem. We even have a product that does this for this exact reason. And you can tailor it and tailor the prompt engineering. So it's got guardrails, so it can't go off left, right, and center. You can then use offline foundational models internally against that RAG model. So the RAG model basically creates the prompt engineering, I suppose, around it, what we put in it to say, answer a question around this based on all this content I've just got for you that's relevant. So you don't have to go out to OpenAI. There are also options if you do need to use a third-party model, where it's almost like, I excuse this as an example, but it's basically a placenta. It says that your data will never go out. So there's this boundary between what you're using, your private IP, and the foundational OpenAI model, for example. Some people don't find that good enough. So if you talk about, say, ultra secret documents, government documents, all that sort of stuff, there's no chance that they're going to even let any of that happen. So you can run it completely on-prem on your own hardware, but you do actually have to have GPUs. It's actually hilarious to watch these things run on normal compute. You'll sit there for, I don't know, a couple of minutes, even more, waiting for it to actually process and give you an answer. But the way to do it is basically don't trust anything. Don't put it out there. Store it on your own drives, like you would do anywhere else, literally on a USB drive that never goes outside.
Be paranoid.
Be paranoid, absolutely. Like a patent. Why do the software companies not actually patent things? Because as soon as they do, they've told you how they do it. So don't trust them. Don't tell it. Don't let it go out, I think is the.
But even from like, there's a bit of a kind of precedent that all of these chat interfaces, they're always just, you can free type as well, and that's kind of become like a bit of the standard.
When you can copy and paste and put things in, let it leak.
But that's because that's how an interface got given to you.
Yeah.
But you can do things, say, as an organization where you say, these are the only types of prompts that I want people to be able to ask, and you can make the input more tailored.
Put guardrails around the input.
Yeah, exactly. So
I wonder if you could get an AI to check what data is going out across all of the network.
Could do that.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Talk about needing GPUs. If you're looking at all of the data, there'd be a fair amount of work going on there. But one thing I wanted to take off on there too is, yes, you may be feeding your data into an AI, but we also have to remember that data may go through many stages before it gets fed into an AI from a learning perspective. You know, you're typing it, so is that getting logged? Is that getting stored somewhere and being batched and fed into the AI for learning purposes at a later date? And that could be happening even when you're not talking to an AI, take Teams or Zoom or whatever else. Whether, you've got assurances or not about how they're using your data, or whether they're keeping your data private to you, there's a good chance that it's being stored somewhere at some point in this process. So you also have a big third-party risk of, okay, worst case scenario, is that an open S3 bucket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is that interim data being stored? So it's not just about it leaking out of the model. It's about someone losing control of their infrastructure and having, terabytes of data that's being used for training future models just hanging out there for anyone to access. So that's a risk as well.
Yeah.
And further, there was a question about whether Copilot can be isolated to your tenant. Yes, but what I just said, essentially.
And also the prompt injection. So it's isolated to your tenant, but I can send you an email and you don't even have to open it. And I've injected some really nasty payload into there. I can do all sorts of things. It's a bit scary that when you think about it.
That comes up all the time with us as well, is companies come to us when they say, we like what Copilot does for us, but we just don't trust every area of it. And it's always because it infiltrates everything, and they don't understand how you can necessarily control.
There are the guardrails and the setting up, but to Stephen's point around how have we set up permissions? Yeah. Well, it's easier if everyone has it, isn't it? We can just get on and do some work.
Super admin.
Yeah, super admin. God powers for everyone. Well, always goes down smooth.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue as well into application security. You talk about prompt injection through an email. So I know some of our guys are on this call, and we do web application pen testing, and there's cross-site scripting, essentially, where you are either sending an email or giving someone a link or presenting something to their browser that's being executed as code, right? That's what cross-site scripting is, without going into a lot of detail. But now, and we would even see, for example, email filtering products, parsing emails, and then we could cause them to go out to the internet and download payloads and all that kind of stuff. But so now think about that in an AI context. If you have an AI reading all of your email, what if I put even invisible text, like white on white text in an email that's getting processed by an AI, and I'm giving directions to that AI that's causing it to do whatever that can do, like whether it's a security product and I'm using it to bypass phishing protections, or whether it just has access to your mailbox and I'm asking it to send me an email, right? Think about all the things from an application security perspective. That's just one example. There are a million ways that if you have AI in your application, now you have to think about all of those web-based attacks, all of the infrastructure attacks. So just like you would with any web application, but now on top of that, you've got all the AI, prompt injection, or otherwise kind of attacks that you also have to protect your infrastructure from. And then think about your liability if you are hosting multiple people's or multiple customers' data together. Now, can I use prompt injection to access, another customer's data? So there's so much there from an application security perspective that I'm probably not even thinking about at this point.
No, it does get quite scary actually, especially when it's like you can't even see the text. You can't even do anything. If you're well, you know, when you can inject data into almost like a RAG model or the large language models, and it literally will do exactly as you tell it, like any computer.
Mm-hmm.
If someone can get in there and do that, they could cause some real damage. They could, you know, there's the one where that people are using the injection model to change bank details to their own bank details. So when they make a payment, it automatically sends it to them instead of someone else. That's crazy, isn't it? We're taking the human out of the loop, hopefully to reduce the errors, and actually injecting a whole host of other potential challenges. But how do you do that? How do you put those guardrails around that prompt engineering to mitigate against it? There's something we were talking about earlier around using AI models to spot prompt injection, or AI models to spot AI models to spot AI models, and we're talking about turtles all the way down. Where does it end? And we were saying about a human being can spot if it's written by ChatGPT or some large language model. We sometimes it's like, I don't know why, but it just is wrong. So
But there is on websites as well what will check if it's
exactly,
by an AI too.
But how do they do that? How do they know? It's weird, isn't it?
Probably about.
You can tell when it's too perfect.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Have you seen the machines, the automation machines that build walls? And what they do is it's almost like a robot, and it's got cameras and scanning. So there's lots of AI in it as well. And it'll build a wall, and you'll look at the wall and go, it's wrong. Something about it just looks wrong, and it's because it's too perfect. And I think that's the same with something that's, you know, like the images that come out of generative AI. You're like, oh, I don't know, it's a bit perfect, and I've got a wonky eye or something. There's imperfections or
in
that
the writing,
make perfection.
There's lack of personality in there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can, no matter how much you say, write like Stephen, be like Stephen, you can still get it. You know it's not. You know it's not that. I think even from the images perspective as well, you see a lot of AI generated images, and you can always see that, like, maybe if there's writing in there, it never does it quite right, or faces are blurred, and they've got 3 eyes and 6 fingers, but that's from like the background perspective. But actually, sometimes it does a really great job on the front ground of it. But yeah, you don't always.
It's about trust, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
You know, I don't know what you're seeing at iON, Stephen, around what are the trust levels of this? Where we go? What's the sort of most common, I suppose, issue that comes up around AI where people are going, I don't trust it, I don't believe it? Is that going to actually be the crux of the adoption of this brand new technology, or, you know, is it going to be something else?
I think it's a big part of it. I think most people, even folks without a huge IT or cybersecurity background, are at the point where I think AI, I'm happy to use AI to inform me, or to give me context, or give me a starting point, or point me in a direction, and so on. I don't think, you know, one of the things I deal with a lot is operational security, like cybersecurity in industrial environments. You know, everything from nuclear plants to manufacturing pharmaceuticals and so on. Do you want an AI acting in those environments? Probably not today, without a very, very, you know, maybe controlling the robot that's doing the one thing.
Yeah.
But making decisions that affect the manufacturing process, no. and I think people still have that level of skepticism and are not there yet. Now, informing me and how I could optimize my process and crunching all that data and giving me ideas, absolutely. And I think for the most part, we're hopefully still there. What I worry about is going back to the detecting AI, is this mystery to people. They don't understand how it works. So I guess the best way, like, now that I have no background as an individual or no perspective, well, the only way I can do some of that checking, like to see if I'm talking to an AI, is to ask another AI. Who better to know? And I think that scares me a little bit as well, because we've already seen, look at facial recognition, or fingerprints, and how, again, it's about your threat model. If you're, worried about a medium security, someone needs physical access to take advantage of that, a misconfiguration or a problem or weakness in the face recognition or fingerprint recognition to log into a computer. That I'm less worried about. But we give the example of airport security. If 1 in 1,000 people gets flagged for additional scrutiny by an AI, can an airport with millions of passengers a day handle that? And the answer is no. You can't do that. So we've got to be really, really careful. And then there's the biases, right? We know face recognition is better with a certain subset of people. And I've read, for example, that an AI writes like someone who's on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's a bias there of basically, okay, I'm going to detect anything written by someone who's not, who doesn't fit the stereotypical human way of writing. Now they're going to be identified as creating AI generated content when they're just some kid trying to get their homework in, right?
Yeah,
like we've got,
very true.
I think we've got a long way to go because of that false positive rate, basically, long story short.
It's almost like it's becoming more and more prevalent, but also in areas that we'd never expect. So did you, have you seen the recent Nobel Prize winning team for chemistry was Dennis and I can't remember the name of the other mathematician. So they're from DeepMind, and they won it for AlphaFold 2 for the protein predictions. They can pretty much predict almost any protein in the human body, which is just mind-blowing. They're not chemists, they're mathematicians. So that's going to drive all sorts of like the pharmaceutical stuff, drug detection, health. It's going to be massive in health. If we're doing that with proteins, just think what it's going to be like for cancer diagnosis, or they're going to be formulating drugs. We're going to put our whole future in the hands of the maths, basically, which are rife with the biases. How the hell are we going to manage that? From a security point of view, but because where my mind goes from a security point of view, we talk about like data leakage, but that can be data injection. So we do a lot in manufacturing, and you mentioned about the manufacturing processes, and you think about well, what if I change that formula or that process or the coolant temperature or whatever by 1 degree? You wouldn't even notice, but it puts it all off. And we're talking about high value manufacturing. It might be in jet engines or nuclear plants or whatever, all those sorts of things. That slight off by one error could cause a huge issue. But we're putting our future totally in the hands of it. How's that? How do we monitor that, especially at scale? What do we do? What options have we got?
I mean, this isn't going to be a very sexy answer, but in some ways, it's back to the basics. Fundamental cybersecurity. Keep the bad guys off your networks. And I know I say that like that's an easy thing to do, and it's not. But I also think that a lot of organizations maybe aren't so good at that kind of thing, and that's where we need to start at the very least. Is keep the bad guys off the networks. And and for me personally, it's still about using the AI to get 80%, 90% of the way there. Like you talk about pharmaceuticals or drugs. Like I have read that AIs are able to basically try, I'm not an expert on the medical side either, try 1,000 or 1,000,000 formulations for a drug that we wouldn't be able to do our traditional ways, and narrow that down and say here are some brand new drugs, and then we have to go to not human trials right away, but you know what I mean, the testing and then to trials and approval process and on down the road. So we can come up with some wonderful new treatments, but it still has to be back-ended by that safety check basically and validation.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stephen. It's still a toddler, right? And a toddler still needs its guardrail. And it's very clever. But it still needs to know when to be reined in, and to put kind of like high critical processes in 100% power of AI. It'd be wrong of us to think that that's the correct way to do it. But like you said, to give it the Let it help you do the 70% of what you do now. Let it help you get to your answers faster or model a few different areas.
Well, it's a bit like
But then
chess,
you
isn't
should
it?
take it.
When it plays chess, actually the best players are when they have a couple of computers and a human mind, not just a computer or just a human mind. You put the power of them together, and that's where the magic happens. A bit like, so if you're playing AlphaGo, we're playing Go, and there's the deep mind against AlphaGo, and it comes move 37, I think it was, which was just something that a human would never have created. But you put the two minds, the artificial mind and the human mind, and then magic happens. I think that's where we're seeing
That's it, yeah.
Cool stuff
Working together with it.
But foundationally, like OT and IT networks, they should be separated. How many times is that not the case? Is the data secured where people can go and inject or do silly things, and make sure that people are on board with it? People are usually the watery blobby thing between the keyboard and everything else. That's usually the attack vector that's possibly one of the worst. Are we putting the wrong things in there? Are we trusting what comes in? It's too easy to copy what we're like. We're talking about like that security vector. Or how easy would it be for someone to, I suppose, if they got hold of my emails, to then run riot? If someone were to actually get in, how fast could they go and cause some serious damage these days? And I reckon they could do it pretty flipping quickly.
Well, if they got a few sound clips in, they could.
Oh, no.
Like you as well.
Who would want to do that? But it's true that like the tone of your voice, the tone of like your emails, how you sign off. At the minute, people can spot it, but I reckon if they got in and understood what you're like, they could change that pretty quickly with generative AI right now.
Oh, so I'll talk for a minute about basically the attacker's view. We're doing this from a penetration testing perspective. I gave a talk last week where I spent $5 on an account, and if anyone's curious, the site is 11labs.io. I spent $5. As I was being introduced for this talk, I recorded the host, and while I was doing the first part of my talk, I uploaded that to 11 Labs, and then I was able to type prompts and have my browser talk back to the audience in the voice of our host.
It's too easy.
In 26, I didn't do 26, but in 26 different languages, and a short delay after I hit enter and when they would speak. But there's ways to compensate for that, including paying more money or pre-recording and pre-generating and so on. But it's so easy to do that, and that's with a $5 a month subscription, right? Now you look at, we are seeing attacks where people are doing that. I'll have to dig them up. I can find some links. There was a gentleman he's actually a US Senator, a lawyer by trade, who got a phone call from his son, who had been in an automobile accident. And whatever, his phone was destroyed, or he didn't have access to his phone, and he was phoning because he needed his dad to post bond, and he needed his dad to talk to this lawyer over there, and on down the line. And keep in mind, his dad, well educated, a lawyer himself who's dealt with these kinds of things, he got a long way down the road to paying this bond to a lawyer. And of course the bondsman was out of town. Like, there were all these things, eventually he did kind of clue in, but it was very well done. There was a woman in Arizona, same thing. Her daughter was supposedly kidnapped and was screaming and crying on the phone and needed $1 million and so on. And in both these cases, it was just luck more than anything that somebody caught something, or the daughter phoned on another line or whatever, right? But those are hugely, those are very easy, and those are huge risks. My dad's 87. He almost got taken in. He was supplying the caller with more information they could feed back to him, right? So I'll come back to this later.
What's your tips though? What's your tips for making sure? Because it's almost like that can happen in business too, quite easily. You're on site or whatever. We see it all the time with emails, and if you can do that with voice, it could quite easily make people take action pretty quickly. So have you got any tips to make sure, instant things that we can just go, how do I make sure that doesn't happen to me? What can I do?
Yeah, I mean, there's the usual phishing security awareness type stuff, right? Resist the urgency, look for things that are not quite right, et cetera, et cetera. But even when I talk about phishing, I kind of like to look at it in two different ways. What am I doing right now? Am I trying to go and look at pictures of cats on the internet? Or am I trying to transfer money out of my bank account? Those are two different things. Those are two things you would use a web browser for. You're using a web browser. That behavior is the same. You're going to the internet. You might get a certificate warning. For one of those, I don't care. If the picture of the cat is fake, do I really care, right? Yeah. If I'm going to log into my bank and transfer money around, then I really do care about what's going on. So the first thing is the context, right? Are we dealing with something important or not? And is someone trying to make me feel panicked, like there's something urgent I have to do? But the second thing is, and the reason I bring that up first is because, again, depending on context, if the big ones for me are dealing with family in various contexts, and from a business perspective, those big business decisions, transferring money being probably the biggest, the CEO's calling you up asking to buy gift cards or whatever, or pay that invoice, transfer that money, do the whatever. There's still that component where you kind of have to recognize that those things are more important than other things. But we're at the point now where we need, quote unquote, out-of-band mechanisms for identifying people. So for family, I've done this with my family, and it's something I would recommend for everybody, is come up with a passphrase, code word mechanism to out-of-band, if you will, identify that you really are talking to your loved one or to your CEO or CFO or whatever. So, in my case,
MFA. It's like multi-factor authentication for people.
It is. What's something that only you know, right? And you could ask about something, what did we do last week when we were here, there, or wherever. But, I always say my kids for the longest time had a wacko idea of where certain countries were in the world, their geography. So I would just ask them, where are those countries? And if they give me the truly correct answer, I know that's not my kids, because they know that I want their wacko answer back. And so whatever that is for you, that is the number one. If you take anything away from this webcast, that is the number one thing you can do to protect yourself, is come up with those passphrases.
I'm going to be doing that myself. Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned about the older people, that might get spoofed into this. That senator that got spoofed into it using AI. It's actually really interesting how you can use AI to combat things like that. We built a product that it wasn't for spoofing for old people. However, it was a great idea.
Definitely wasn't.
It definitely wasn't. It was actually to protect children from bullying online. So they might, and we were talking about context. And actually, at its heart, there was AI that would understand all the different channels on a mobile device, like WhatsApp or Snapchat or email or a text message or all these different email, anything else. And it would understand, is there potential bullying going on? And the AI is so good at that. It's actually really great at going, this, categorizing it almost and going, as a human being would. That's I think where the intelligence we see. It's like it can understand that is actually bullying. It can understand that certain phrases aren't in a certain context between, having the history and everything else. And it came up, we thought, well, and we used AI to solve that problem. And it came up with like, wouldn't that be amazing to give to our parents? It would spot that SMS spoof. It could be used to spot a phone call quite easily. The number, it could look that up quite quickly. It could, understand, is this real or not? Is that a real voice? Again, we're going to that whole, is an AI checking the AI, and combating them. Imagine you've got these whole agents protecting our parents or anyone else for that matter from these scams. It's like the spam of spam controllers, spam assassin almost of the new world of these different attacks.
I'm picturing my phone ringing and saying AI, potential AI call now.
Do you want me to handle it for you?
Yeah,
just like in Google, when you've got an Android phone, it will answer the phone for you and do the screening. Imagine if it just did all of that and you never even knew that was going on. The AIs are battling in the background and protecting you. We should make that app for companies. We'll protect you from these spoofs and anything else that's happening like that.
And you know what? There, the penalty for false positives isn't necessarily as high, right? If you
Yeah.
choose to ignore that request that's being made to you over the phone today, well, maybe that person will be more persistent and come back tomorrow, kind of thing. But you know, legitimately or illegitimately. But the cost of being wrong is lower.
Yeah.
And there's options there, like, you know what? Run on my dad's phone or iPad or whatever, and text me when he's being scammed, so I can phone him.
Yeah.
Right. Or get conferenced in, or conference me in, or whatever that is, right? There's so many options there that I think that's a fantastic option for an AI.
Yeah.
Or you know, the you must wait an hour before making this transaction kind of things, right?
And it backs
Those are
off.
perfect.
It's almost like a preventative thing. For each transaction, there becomes a bigger period of time, and it backs off more and more and more every time you try. So it's like a preventative
The AI
DDoS.
waiting room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
There's a couple, sorry, just a couple questions I was going to touch on. Are biometrics in AI systems that you know of? So I don't know one way or another. I could imagine AIs being pretty good at analyzing biometrics
Yeah.
to see, you know, is this a match? Are you guys aware of anything like that?
Not come across it to that level in terms of biometrics. It's definitely not like Mission Impossible yet, that's for sure. However, I think in that space, I don't know about this is what my children do. Well, one child in particular, using my phone and just shoves it in front of my face and runs off with it. But what's really interesting is the combats these days of I don't know if you've seen it, again, it's rolled out in the Google phones. If it's snatched out of your hand, it will automatically know that's the case and lock down. But from a biometric point of view, you can, the systems that capture like your fingerprint or whatever, they have mechanisms to back off, don't they? So if you've tried it 3 times, it's like, well, you're not using biometrics, you can't do it. And to replicate, you know, that sort of level, you know, you're trying, there's fingerprint's probably not the best one, but retinal or face scans, there's so many different permutations of that. To try and replicate that at the accuracy that they need, it takes far too many attempts. I don't think the AI I haven't seen is there yet to do it. Not that we've seen in that case. And I think really probably want to switch off biometrics if you're that bothered about security. It's very convenient. I don't know if you'd feel the same, Stephen, but I would say that because my kids can do it quite easily, switch it off, and that'll save you from the convenience in one way, but also from the potential threat and the pain of it being stolen.
My only comment there is only if it doesn't make you choose a crappy password, right? So I've turned off biometrics, and now, well, I'm not typing in a 20-character password to unlock my phone. If that's your trade-off, and now your password is 1234, then turn on the biometrics.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you've created a much bigger risk by choosing a password of 1234. So that's the trade-off there for me.
It's amazing what they're doing at the minute. Sorry, go on. Sorry, go on, Stephen.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to talk about. I was going to go into quantum then, in terms of like the encryption stuff. But are you aware that now they are actually copying data out of the fiber optic lines? So what they do is they bend the fiber optics, and because it reflects around the corner, they copy it out. And what they have is they now have photons that will validate a line. So we work with a quantum computing company, and what they have is a system that will validate a line from, say, let's go from across America, that one optic line, or across the Atlantic, and they put their system on one end and validate it on the other end, and they send a photon down, and that photon can tell if the line's been bent and the optics are being copied. And what that told me is, if that thing exists to validate a line, someone has been doing this and copying data, and they know it. It's like, where the hell is this going? You know, we're almost, all of that biometric and security and encryption is all going to be blown out of the water potentially with like quantum. I don't know how you fit with that one.
We'll have to do another webcast just on quantum. I think quantum is very, very good at certain things. And even when it comes to, like, just to tie it into cybersecurity really quickly, encryption, quantum is scarily good, not there yet, but getting there at breaking asymmetric or public key cryptography.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not so good at breaking symmetric or private key cryptography. So the thing we do use to do the actual encryption, quantum can make it maybe half as effective. So double your key size and you're generally okay.
Yeah.
Asymmetric, it just completely breaks. So the authentication and digital signatures, that's where we're in for the real pain. But we'll have to do a webcast.
That's a whole new bag
on quantum. Just looking at questions, I want to touch on a couple things so there was a question: do we know how many AI malicious actors are already out there, and what's their primary focus? So yes, primary focus is extracting money, phishing, whether by voice or by email, being the primary mechanism. And just to give you an idea from a phishing perspective, I did this as an experiment. There are tools out there where you can select a model, an LLM like Llama, because it's free and pretty comprehensive, and you can build a bot. I gave my bot maybe 10 lines of instructions saying, you're in marketing and I want you to create a convincing, realistic, I can't remember, a bunch of adjectives, email, enticing was one of them, that is going to make my customers click and base it on my company's brand, my company's website. Like I had the AI go look that up. I didn't feed it to them. And basically I got to the point where I put in company name and it went to that company's website. It figured out brand, it figured out voice, it works really well with public companies, what kind of advertisements they'd already done. And it generated a perfect phishing email in their brand with a pretext, of something they would send you an email for, an ad for, and it's perfect for phishing, right? And now I can scale that.
Did it so quickly? That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and I could scale it. So now I could, with a couple lines of Python, here's a list of 100 companies, feed them into the AI one by one, go harvest usernames from LinkedIn or whatever, and fire out that email to 100 companies or 1,000. And now it's not so much the spray and pray that you get from threat actors, but it's very, very targeted and very, very authentic, right?
Yeah.
If you also combine that with something not exactly on the same vein, but something like, if we're doing a pen test and we get access to one person's email, well, now we can grab that email and we can send emails from that address, but we've got a huge amount of training data now to train to write emails exactly like that person. Or I could do that from their LinkedIn or from their Facebook or Twitter or whatever, social media, and use that just for sending emails outside in, impersonating people. Like all of these are pretty common attacks today using AI, right? Like this is all
the scale,
today.
the mass that it gets. Like I say,
yes.
Not only is the 15-year-old script kiddie who can take down a whole company, there's almost like a 10-year-old can do it. It's almost that the barrier has gone all the way down. That's the scary bit. And it all comes back down to foundational principles of the basics of making sure you're covered. It doesn't really matter if it's a phishing attack, if everyone goes, that's a phishing attack, but it's getting harder and harder to identify them. What are we going to do? Switch off email, switch the computer off, just all stop, go back to paper.
Internet go.
But
that is it. It's like, it's also that's also what it does very well. It helps you scale. It helps you increase the volume of stuff that you're doing.
The good stuff.
From a good perspective. But of course, with all this, you can put it into that scary world where almost you get yourself in a position where I'm just going to do nothing with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to ignore that it even exists until eventually it overtakes us as businesses, and it happens anyway.
Oh yeah.
Do you know that's you've got to find that nice middle ground.
Bots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're gonna have AIs fighting AIs, right? But, as we get closer to the top of the hour, I wanted to just ask one other question, you guys. So you talked earlier about having more focused or specific models, and I think cybersecurity is one area where we have a lot of possibilities there. Because yes, there's AI detecting AI-based attacks and so on, but we have to deal. I think email is probably the place where we've seen AI for a long time, really helping, with spam and phishing control. But how else? I mean, and I can sort of head down this path, but how can we use AI to be more effective at our jobs from a cybersecurity perspective? I don't think it's going to answer all the questions, but how can it make us more effective? How can we, we know there's a skills shortage in cybersecurity today. So how can we mitigate that with AI?
I suppose it's just like any other industry. So again, manufacturing, you have these processes, you have this knowledge, it's knowledge transfer. And it was the astronaut Chris Hadfield. He had this, there was a phrase of the blood book, for the fighter pilots. And what that is, passing on the knowledge. So it was called the blood book because it was created through blood. People died, to get that knowledge. And you see it with, airline pilots, you have the checklists. Now, there's so much, you speak to a security professional and they just know stuff. It's like, how did you know that with the context? How did you think like that? What was your process? What was your recipe? Not only did you put, 10 ounces of sugar and a butter, I want to know how you baked it. I want to know what the quality of those things are. I'm using the analogies because they're the only way I think I can almost express this stuff. And that's how we're going to scale it. So if we, for example, if we created a foundational model for that was just for security professionals, maybe that'll accelerate the knowledge and the breadth and the ability, the leverage of those security professionals, the new ones coming into the market. So it can answer questions within that context. It has all of that blood book in it. It has all of that context, and we can be superhuman. We can be like the security professional on steroids. So you can be leveraged. That's the way I like to think of it. You can use this technology to leverage that incredible mind and almost like replicate it for the future generations. And imagine if we can then put that in the hands of people who are in organizations. It's almost like, let's make a replica Stephen that can actually sit in a company, and you're on-prem. You're the on-prem security professional that's on the shoulder of every single person. They all become security professionals. Because if they all thought a little bit like you, how many fewer attacks would there be? That's how I'd like to think about it, and probably how we should
So we make like a Stephen Clippy.
Yeah,
sort
Clippy.
of,
It looks like this is a phishing email. How would you respond to this? I think what we need is a key code word.
But it is that you make it so it's almost in your face. So if it actually, instead of it being a Clippy, it's an alert that comes in. We think that this is actually an attack. It could be AI, and it's just so within the context of what you're doing. And when you're in your browser, we think this could be AI generated, and it tells you all this stuff as you go in.
And it's the training stuff. It works in so many different ways. That's probably how I'd respond to that off the cuff. Although I probably would get a whiteboard out and start thinking about it. And let's get to the real problem here, Stephen. Let's do some user story mapping and some design thinking and really get down to the core principles of this problem and what are we really trying to solve, and then probably build it back up from there. But there's definitely opportunity in that space.
Well, it's perfect because I've said multiple times over the last week, we need a cybersecurity unicorn, basically. We need more unicorns. The person for that role, they have to have so many skills now.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we see in cyber, is you have to have a vast diversity of knowledge and skills to really succeed in cybersecurity. And one of those, like I've seen this, one of those people doesn't matter how big the company is, you get one of those people and they can revolutionize the security program or posture of an organization. But if we can use an AI to make people into unicorns, if you will, or become that unicorn, and this particular one that we were talking to too, their whole premise in doing their job, they're running, I don't want to call this SOC, but running a blue team, running defense for a large organization. Their whole approach basically comes down to scoring. That is what they did. And they built a ton of their own tooling to score things, to bring to surface the things that matter.
Yeah, like
but now if you can, and if you can take that person's knowledge and use that to train an AI to do that scoring, is it going to be perfect? Of course not. But now that's the whole point with scoring, is we think this trends more to this side or more to that side. So I'd love to see more of that happening.
It's codifying it to scale it. And that's basically what it's all about, isn't it? That's what these large language models are. They're being codified of the whole knowledge of the whole world. So we can do that in a niche way, in a very, very specific way.
100%. Before we hit the top of the hour here, there was one other question. Do you see AIs becoming that black box, that mystery that it's just sitting there and it's making corporate decisions without supporting explanation or real data? And before I send that question to you, that's one other thing that just occurred to me is when you are interacting with the AI, ask it why it's answering or where it's getting its information from. Sorry, that just popped into my head.
Yes,
that's
one
one
really
thing you can definitely do.
Yeah,
but
because it won't
are we going to
cite
see
it.
these black boxes?
Yeah, because I think we already are. There's lots of stuff that goes on behind the walls that people don't see. It's almost like when people go, "Oh, we don't have all these robots don't exist." I mean, if you just go past some factories these days, the dark factories, it all exists. Industry 4.0, they're all automatically tended to. It is there, and I think these systems do already exist. So if I asked you, who decided on your insurance premium? Who decided that? Was it a person? Or was that actually a very large statistical model that had some play in that? I think that's already starting to happen. I don't think I'm a believer that, again, I always go with you put the computer and the human together and it's magic. So just like getting on an aeroplane, they can fly themselves, absolutely. But we have not one but two people flying the aeroplane as well. And I think AI is actually held to a higher standard. So if you think about cars, you go in a Tesla, right? They're held to a much higher standard than a human being. If I went along in my Tesla and drove it into a wall, it'd be like, oh, well, it's the human being. But if the Tesla did it after billions of miles of driving, it'd be like, oh, it's unsafe. Hang on a minute, it's a different standard. I think we'll start seeing more almost like aids. It's like where the decisions are made in boardrooms or whatever, there'll be an aid to it. It'll be hearts and minds. The mind will definitely be driven by data. And we see that so much in every sort of boardroom that we're going into now. Can you help us make the decisions better using the data we've got? And obviously we're putting AI models on the top of that. I don't think it'll get rid of people right now. Maybe like some of the films we see right in the future, but it's definitely going to be supporting role. Yeah. It's not going to be the role, but my insurance definitely is. So I don't like them because my insurance is too much.
Yeah, and my kids are teenagers, and man, I want to shoot that AI for car insurance. But before we end here, I mean, from my end, as I said earlier, if you take one thing away from this, have that mechanism, that passphrase, code word, question, whatever it is, to identify both your loved ones and the people who hold the money in a corporate context or make the big decisions. That would be my one big takeaway for everyone from this conversation. Do you guys have anything on?
I think
on your end?
Definitely, certainly do. It's got to be the one thing that really matters because it's the thing that identifies you as a real person. And like we say, it's just like Inception, the film. Have your spinny model. That's how I'm thinking about it, to prove if I'm in the real world or not. Awesome.
And of course, if anyone has any other questions, you can reach out through the invite that you had, or you can head to our websites. We're happy to talk further about either cybersecurity or AI, or we can both come and talk to you about cybersecurity and AI and help further your organization in either space.
Securing that AI on-prem if you really want to, if you want to go that far.
Yeah, build your own.
Yes.
We are seeing, I will say that, we are seeing a lot. I personally am a fan of the focused models, right? I have a model that does one thing, does it well. Topic for another day, I saw somebody basically use that as their virtual CISO. If you feed it the right source data, it can answer all those questions the board wants to have answered much faster than getting people collecting all that information. So lots of opportunities there.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's been great having a chat, Stephen, and go security.
All right. That's what I said. Go AI.
Go AI. Yes, that too.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
See you later.